Hey, my friends, do you ever feel like you're constantly swimming against the current, trying to control every aspect of family life? Today, we're exploring a life changing concept that might just be the missing piece you've been searching for. Today, we're going to discover how surrendering it can actually lead to more fulfillment and less stress in your marriage and your parenting journey. So stay tuned. Hey, parents, welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. Do you want to raise your kids better and have a stronger marriage? Are you up late at night researching marriage and parenting tools and self care tips? Do you start each day hoping for deeper connections and less chaos, but it ends with family arguments and going 12 different directions again? My name's Kendra, wife, mom, therapist, and growth enthusiast. It wasn't until I discovered how to fulfill my unmet needs that I was finally able to show up as my best self as a spouse and parent. I realized that by meeting my needs, I could more fully meet the needs of my family with more energy and less resentment. In this podcast, I teach parents skills like boundary setting, prioritizing personal needs, communication, and claiming ownership. Just like my clients, you'll be shocked by the improvement in your marriage, parenting, and personal life when you focus on fulfilling your important unmet needs. Ready to prioritize yourself so you can quit mentally throat punching people? Then grab those earbuds and head outside, and let's rock and talk. Welcome back, my friends, to Fulfillment Therapy, the podcast dedicated to helping parents rediscover their zest for life and to find that balance in the chaos of parenting. I'm your host, Kendra Nielsen, and today we're diving into a transformative concept that could be the key to unlocking that more fulfilling life that you're seeking and allow you to have greater surrender and acceptance. Before I hop into that, I just want to thank you so much for all of your podcast reviews and all of you that share these podcast episodes because that is what gets us seen and expands our reach. So thank you so much for all that you do to support Fulfillment Therapy. And don't forget to check out our blog at fulfillmenttherapy.org/blog because all the information we ever teach on any of these episodes we turn into blog posts as well, so you can have that information there at any time. That is available for you. All right, now back to the episode for today. The reason that I wanted to talk about this was because my sister-in-law actually recommended this book by Michael Singer, and I've heard a lot about The Untethered Soul, and I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to read it. I had mixed reviews, but I thought I'll just try out this book and see what his style is, and I really did love it. It feels like this topic that I want to explore a lot more in this next stage of life. And I know that it could increase my fulfillment even more. And if it's able to do that, I want to give that to clients and listeners as well. We're going to explore what surrender really looks like in your life as a parent and as a spouse, and also what acceptance looks like. It's so much easier said than done, but we're going to explore what more we can do because it really does feel like this key piece in fulfillment that is often overlooked. A lot of my clients, when I talk about surrender and acceptance, they say, "Oh, that sounds like giving up or just being passive and rolling over." And there's moments when I think that is the case too. But when I actually study it, I find that's not the case at all. It's about letting go of things that we can't control and embracing what life presents to us. For parents running on fumes, this approach can be game-changing in your life. What is surrender? Surrender is the practice of accepting life as it unfolds, rather than constantly fighting against it. I personally get stuck in those ruts where I feel like I'm fighting against it instead of just accepting what is with almost this curiosity, almost like simply observing instead of trying to change something that you don't have the power to change. So it's about trusting that process and allowing life to flow naturally, for lack of a better way to put it. Acceptance, on the other hand, is about being flexible and tolerant and open minded. Michael Singer, the one that wrote the Surrender Experiment, describes it in a very interesting way. He said, The practice of surrender is done in 2 steps. First, you let go of the personal reactions of like and dislike that form inside your mind and heart. And second, with the resultant sense of clarity, you look to see what is being asked of you by the situation unfolding in front of you. He had such amazing ways of looking at surrender and acceptance that I really enjoyed. I would highly encourage you to go read it because this component is missing in our culture. There's not a lot of us that think much about surrender and acceptance. But those clients that I see that are really able to do that and learn to let go, those are the ones that have that peace and tranquility and fulfillment that they want to have. But most of us are so high strung and controlling and tense that it's difficult for us to actually surrender. And honestly, we all need more practice. Let's break this down a bit more. I'll share an example. Let's talk about Sarah. Sarah is a mother of 3 and she feels constantly overwhelmed. She's always trying to control every aspect of her family life, from her kids' schedules to her husband's habits. The more she tries to control, the more stressed she becomes. One day, she decides to experiment and start practicing acceptance. She lets go of her rigid expectations and starts accepting situations as they come in her life. And then, to her surprise, not only do her stress levels decrease, but her family relationships improve as well. Put yourself in that hypothetical situation. Do you see yourself trying to control your kids' schedules, trying to dictate what your spouse does, trying to hold on to these rigid and high expectations? Not that high expectations are bad, but there's that rigidity and that control is the difficult part that will prevent you from letting go and having that surrender and that acceptance. And can you imagine also what it would be like if you were able to let go a little bit more? Well, how can we do this? Because truly, I don't even always know. And I'm constantly exploring how I can take that to the next level because this is something I really want to improve in my life. One simple thing you can do that Michael Singer talks about is you can quiet the mind. So, this can start with a simple 5-minute meditation each day. When I was doing the best at this, it was part of my morning routine. Sometimes I skip that meditation to get things moving faster, but then I am not able to let go as much. When I'm first starting out, I really liked those guided meditations. If you're not very familiar with meditating, I personally enjoy somebody else teaching me and training me on a topic that I'm interested in at the time, like surrender, for example. For busy parents, this can be done right after your kids leave. Maybe they get on the bus or right after they go to bed. It really doesn't have to take long. Another thing that is different from some things that I've heard from other mental health leaders is say yes to opportunities. And I really like this part about the book too. At first, I was like, wow, he's being really passive and not asserting himself. But then I realized that his motives were different. It wasn't because he was afraid of conflict. It wasn't because he didn't want to disappoint people, but it was because he was trying to let go. He was trying to get his own ambitions and self out of the way and accept more of what life was offering him and exploring that almost like a gift instead of resisting it. And that's a concept we don't talk a lot about. There's parts of me that are like, you have to do this and this. But my higher self would say, that feels right. That resonates to some degree, as long as you're not moving into that avoidance or being a doormat. Let me give you a quick example. When unexpected playdates or family outings come up, say yes instead of automatically declining due to the plans or the to-do list you have, and allow yourself to be present in that. And I'll explain that more in a second. But also practice non-resistance. When a toddler has a meltdown in the grocery store, instead of getting frustrated, take a deep breath, accept the moment for what it is. Normalize that and recognize I can let go and ground myself before I move forward. Focus on the present. Avoid dwelling on the past or worrying about the future and engage fully in what is happening right now. This is connected to letting go of control. Recognize that trying to control everything creates struggle, tension, stress, and unhappiness. Allow life to unfold naturally without forcing outcomes. I recognize that is much harder than it sounds. Brené Brown Said, acceptance of what is the first step in any real change. Do you have that acceptance? Do you have that surrender? Let's talk about some of the benefits of surrender and acceptance, especially for parents and spouses. We want to know the benefits if we're going to put all this work into it, right? Like almost everything, it reduces stress by quite a bit when we stop trying to control everything. And their stress levels drastically decrease, especially as parents. It also improves relationships when we accept that our spouse or our partner or our children are who they are rather than trying to change them. I know this probably resonates with a lot of you that have been married for a while when you've been trying to change your spouse for so long and you recognize it just doesn't work. It also allows you to be more present with your family instead of constantly worrying about the future or regretting the past. You can have that healthier, happier presence, right? I often get stuck in those to dos or those next steps, and I just keep running with it in my mind instead of enjoying that moment with my kids and learning to shelf those things, to let that go. Another benefit is it increases your empathy. It helps you understand your values and differences and leads to more compassion and understanding in your relationships. And I'll give you another quick story about this. One of my clients is this high powered executive and father of two, always torn between work and family. He's either checking emails or his phone, and he spends his family time stressing out about work projects. But when he learned this concept that we're talking about, like surrendering and letting go of control and offering more acceptance, he decided to more fully embrace what he was doing in the moment. And that took practice, that took setting boundaries, that took doing more meditation and discussing this in therapy so that he could practice it more fully in his life with that greater accountability. And then when he was at work, he focused entirely on work. But at home, he learned to put away his phone and give his full attention to his family. And that simple act of surrendering to that present moment really did transform his life and his sense of fulfillment. I wonder if you could do the same thing. Like in a small way, how could you practice greater surrender and acceptance in your life, whether as a parent, personally, or as a spouse? Now let's talk about some of the challenges that come from practicing that surrender and acceptance, because there are definitely some of them. The big one is fear of losing control. So many of us are control freaks and we really cling tightly to that. But surrender isn't about becoming passive, but it's about accepting and trusting what shows up in your life rather than trying to control it. Getting curious about why it might be showing up. Just noticing it instead of attaching that positive or negative label to it. There's also societal pressure. Our culture often emphasizes control and achievement, and I totally get that. I've been there and I fall into that back and forth, and I have to pull back and reevaluate often. Recognize that true fulfillment comes from within and not from meeting those external expectations or crossing off all those to dos. Now, that does give you a dopamine hit, but it doesn't mean that it will give you lasting fulfillment. And this podcast is all about helping you find lasting fulfillment. Another potential challenge is self-judgment. It is so challenging, my friends, to surrender and to let go of control when we've been doing it for most of our lives. It is not easy, and we can be really hard on ourselves when we're not getting it quickly. I'm raising my hand here because I totally do that too. Eckhart Tolle, he's amazing. I love his books. But he said this: sometimes surrender means giving up trying to understand and becoming comfortable with not knowing. That really struck a chord with me, and I really don't like not knowing. But again, this is that next level of surrender, of acceptance, right? Just letting go that you won't have all the answers, and that's okay. That's part of the human experience. All right, I'm just going to end with some simple, practical ways that you can cultivate that greater acceptance and surrender. If this is really where that fulfillment and that peace and that tranquility lie, how can we start that? It all comes back to those small and simple things that seem to be the answers, but just that extra reminder to do those things. Practice mindfulness, put it into your daily routine, whether that's 5 minutes, whether that's this deep, really meaningful prayer or mantra or guided meditation, whatever that is, and not just this rote thing that we do and we count as mindfulness, but we know in our heart it's not really that. The second thing is cultivating self-awareness. Pay attention to your emotions, triggers, and reactions, especially when it comes to parenting. Just notice when you feel that resistance or that need to control. I know I have those moments so often in parenting and marriage that I feel like I'm learning this over and over. I get so much practice. You'd think I'd be really good at it by now, but not always the case. The next one is embracing imperfection. Like maybe you're a recovering perfectionist. I feel like a lot of us are in many ways. But remember that perfection is unattainable in this life and you will have your ups and downs. Embrace that imperfection and this experience. Understand that not only are you going to make mistakes, but so is your child, the rest of your kids, or your spouse, or your loved ones. The next one is foster that independence. This is challenging for those helicopter parents out there, but this is where you encourage your child's autonomy, that freedom that is innate in them, that independence at any age, and allow those age appropriate responsibilities and decision making opportunities. Trust their ability to learn and grow from their experiences. They are so much more capable than we give them credit for. When we don't lean into this, we create anxious kids that are not able to practice that surrender and acceptance themselves. This next one goes right along with that. Practice that radical acceptance. Accept your kids as they are and focus on knowing them and appreciating their uniqueness and communicating your acceptance through your words and your actions. That is also difficult. Do you feel like you're able to celebrate your child's uniqueness and communicate that with your kids through your words and your actions? I feel like all of us say maybe a little bit, but we could all lean in and try a little bit more to do that. I just have two left. The next one is change your perspective. So instead of trying to change your spouse or your child, focus instead on trying to understand their needs and their feelings and approach things that come up with compassion, with empathy. And last but not least, work on that self-acceptance. Remember that accepting yourself is just as important as accepting your kids, your spouse, or a stranger on the street. Let your children see what self-acceptance looks like. Model that for them. All right, my friends, just to conclude this episode on surrender and acceptance, I want to remind you of the key takeaways from today. Surrender and acceptance are about letting go of control and embracing life as it unfolds. Practicing surrender and acceptance can massively reduce your stress and improve your relationships. Those small acts of letting go and accepting can lead to profound changes in your satisfaction. I promise you, my friends. And remember, the goal is simply progress, not perfection right now. That will, depending on your beliefs, come in time, but not today. Just start small and be patient with yourself. My friends, I encourage you to just think of one thing that you can do as this act of surrender or acceptance this week. Maybe it's letting your child choose their own outfit, even if it looks crazy and they look like Fancy Nancy. It doesn't matter. Maybe it's accepting your husband's way of loading the dishwasher and not commenting. Whatever it is, just notice it and let it go. Practice those small, tiny steps towards greater acceptance and surrender so you can have greater life satisfaction. Thanks for tuning in to Fulfillment Therapy, my friends. Until next time, remember that sometimes the path to a more fulfilling life is not about doing more, but about surrendering to what is and accepting life's beautiful imperfections. It reminds me of this yogi, this really Zen person just able to let go. If we can all practice what others have learned more fully and apply that to our relationships, fulfillment really will follow. Thanks for listening, my friends. Don't forget to check out our new courses that are now released on fulfillmenttherapy.org. We have Ignite Your Life, a personal growth course, Mend Your Marriage, a couples course to deepen that connection and intimacy, and to Find Your Focus. And that is a course to help you begin a journey towards starting an online business and a podcast if you're interested in doing something like I'm doing here today. Love to help people become their best selves, and I want to help other people put great things out in this world, and I know I can help you do that very effectively in all of those courses. So check them out online. All right, my friends, I'll see you back here in just a few days. Until then. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you. No matter what your house or your hair looks like, I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.